Just loading the page. Yep, just got the notification. Yep. All right, sweet. Okay.
So how did it go?
Good. So I've nearly finished I've got like 30 minutes or so, a bit more left on the analyzing lies videos. Otherwise, I've gone through those. There was a bit more discussion, not with the original guy on the LessWrong thread that we were thinking about the other day, but with a different guy. I don't know if it's a good like discussion to use. The links are maybe not working very well. In that it's linking to the wrong thing, even though I've tried to permalink to.
I don't like their permalinks at all. They put the comment you linked to at the top with a see in context button next to it, instead of actually seeing it in context.
Yeah, so if you click on like the second link I had there, like LessWrong thread deepest comment, then it does take you to the right comment at the top. But then once it's loaded the whole page, it then scrolls down to a different comment as part of a different thread, presumably because of the hash link, maybe. But it's like, yeah, it's pretty annoying.
Oh, so
Like they obviously like they have the ability to like show you the link in context.
Yeah. Yeah, their form software isn't very good.
They've spent effort on the wrong things. It's sort of annoying because, like, even one of the things you'll notice through my posts is I've got to go to an effort to like get a second level of quoting in there, like the context of what they're replying to, and that's really frustrating. I think it's part of the reason this guy hasn't been able to stay on topic, in that he just replies to words out of context, and so it like you lose the point of why you are actually having a discussion chain. So like in this one, this is sorry, go on.
Well, I was gonna ask first about the videos. Did you take any notes? Did you have any thoughts or questions on them? Also, I wanted to show you how their forum works with large threads.
Oh my god.
You see the diagonal? Yeah. We were looking at archiving some stuff. But it's like this across multiple browsers and multiple threads.
This screams of like math's gone wrong. Like someone's put some assumption in there, and then it's started doing weird stuff once it goes outside those bounds.
Yeah.
That's wow. That's hilariously bad. So anyway, yeah, in terms of treeing up a discussion, this feels like something that might be useful. I don't know if it's the best example, but it's at least deep.
Okay.
One of the other things that I was thinking of doing, which I figured I'd just mention, was I started a bit of a process of like, so I found a like a paper sort of thing that someone wrote in the blockchain world that was criticized for being like difficult to understand, and so I read it and I thought that like the criticisms of it being difficult to read were fair enough, but I'm planning on writing a summary post, like an analysis of it to what it's saying. So I figured I'd mention that that's something I'm planning to do soon as well.
So the video stuff?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, so I didn't really take any notes. I thought some of the like discussion was like good and interesting. I didn't think that there was like anything that was like super like important that I missed as far as what I've gone through so far. I haven't looked too much at the text comparison stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, but no, it was good. The grammar stuff was nice. In that was like I didn't do too much of that. And it was sort of yeah. I think it's good to see, and there are some good examples of how people sort of get themselves confused or lost in various stuff when they try and be too fancy as well, which was
Yeah.
good. Also, sort of, I guess, like weasel words feels like it's not particularly what we're talking about, but there's a lot of that sort of stuff that goes on, which is, easier to see when you start analyzing the grammar of what people are actually talking about and how they form their sentences around things.
Yeah. Yeah, the
I've been thinking,
grammar reveals a lot of their emphasis in a way that lets you analyze it explicitly instead of just having an intuitive feel for how they're talking.
yep. No, I think it's really valuable to be able to break it down like that. Because often we have an intuition, but without actually like looking at the sentence construction, it's sometimes hard to figure out what that intuition
Yeah.
is for or
When we
doing.
have an intuition, it's hard to communicate it to other people, especially the person you're accusing of doing something wrong.
Yep. So, should we start going through this?
Okay, yeah.
So this. One thing that I really dislike as well is when you like zoom in or out and all the context on the page changes. Like it can't stay on the thing that you're focused on.
Right.
All right, let me bring up a tree.
Okay, so which comment should I look at?
So the start of this tree. So basically, there's a like a thread between me and Tag, or TAG. Starts off with a bit of stuff from like about CR talking to MakoYass, and he sort of seemed to have a bit more like the discussion was a bit better with him, even though there was like he seemed fairly stream of consciousness and like not everything was clear in his mind. Tag seems clearer, but is not very good at discussing a point.
Yeah, the
So yeah.
Yas guy, by the way,
Hmm.
what he said to me is, "I'm glad to hear from you," and I asked if he was interested in extended discussion. He said, "I am interested in discussing it." And then he didn't reply to my post from 2 days ago trying to start a discussion.
Yep. That was I've noticed that he has posted other like he's still been active and doing stuff.
Oh, I
Oh,
didn't
actually
check
no,
that.
sorry. I don't think no, not since 2 days ago. He hasn't done anything since then. He was active on some stuff after I posted some things. And I'm wondering if he's going to get back to me. He wrote like a short story about something to sort of try and explain a concept about not being able to tell where consciousness was in things. It's sort of it's a bit hard to explain, but I posted some notes and some questions and he hasn't gotten back about that either, so I don't know. He seems lower volume, but Tag is pretty responsive. It's just that he don't think he sort of is on topic. So I don't know, maybe there's like a good subtree we could focus on though, as a smaller problem to start with.
Okay. Should we just start here, or do you have something else in mind?
So there's a part where I mention, yeah, this is not so. This is a good place to start, I think.
Okay, so to start the tree, can you try to summarize the context a little bit? Because this isn't a
Yeah.
good tree root.
No, yeah. So, well, I guess that's part of the thing. He doesn't like quote what he's replying to, and there's a lot that I wrote before that,
Yeah.
in response to MakoYass. So, maybe this is not so good a like the next one down from me might be better because the context, what we end up talking about particularly. So this there's a thread that sort of follows on from the thing that I've highlighted here. We can also come up with criticisms that are sort of independent where they came from. Like a new criticism is somewhat linked to idea A, but idea A can be wrong without implying the criticism is wrong. And it doesn't make either theory A or B more likely, or something like that. When this happens, it just means there's two criticisms, not one. And then so we start discussing that a bit. So that's talking about, yeah. So criticisms that sort of come from a school of thought but aren't dependent on the school of thought.
Okay, let's just throw this in. Max. Okay, so you want to try to break your comment down into nodes?
Yep. So bring this over here. You can see what I'm doing. I'm going to move this off screen. So I've just put them like this to start with so that then we can drag them around and things.
Yeah.
I feel like it's, yeah, easier to go horizontal first, and then if we've got a reason to go vertical, we can do that. So yeah, so I've got 4 paragraphs. The first one is about like mutual refutations that, competing theories provide for each other. Then there's a point that if theories don't offer some refutation of competing theories, then that's a criticism of that theory. And then there's criticisms that come up that are independent so that they still criticize it regardless of whether the sort of theory the person was advocating originally is true or not. And then the possibility that they're both wrong anyway. So I've sort of, gone through like these 4 cases of the relationships between A and B. So do we need more context?
It's reasonably guessable. So, like, what do you think his concern is? Why is he talking about this particular situation?
So I think, well, it's in response to a much longer thing that I posted about, which is more like just sort of like notes a lot in general. It's discussions of like the foundations of CR. So it sort of comes out. MakoYass posts some notes about what he interpreted from watching some DD stuff, and then I've posted some things are either like trying to respond to some of the points he made. Like the discussion, like this sort of thread starts with me quoting MakoYass, where he's talking about practiced a method of holding multiple possible theories and acting with reasonable uncertainty over all of them. And I sort of point out that that's not what like people in CR sort of do, because if there's one reason that something's wrong, then it's just wrong. And there's a bit of explanation about that. I post some stuff trying to give him some points about critical rationalism to start a discussion. That's not where we come off though. CS's truth is subjective. Then there's a
By the
post about that.
way,
Yep.
You should be careful about attributing things to CR. Popper said things about preferring the theory that best survived criticism, not single criticism refutes. He did think single criticism refutes in certain cases, like contradicting evidence, refutes if we accept background knowledge, etc.
Okay, yeah. I'm not quite. I mean, I'm using like I often just put CR in there because I don't have a good label for things otherwise.
You need a label?
I'm not sure. I don't often use it, I think. Or if I do, I in this thread, I think I don't really like attribute too much to it from this point on. So I think like one of the references here is like a claim that refuting that argument would not refute CR and vice versa. So just talking about Popper's ideas in general there, because of the context.
Okay, so without reading the context, what I would guess the context for this is, part of it is, there's a discussion about epistemology. It involves claims about refuting ideas. TAG thinks refutation is limited because it runs into this problem. Like, I'm guessing what he's trying to say is, like, there's this difficulty that your epistemology would have to overcome. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like, I guess he sees this as somehow, like, important in a way that means that I'd be wrong or something. I'm not quite sure, because it doesn't seem that way to me, of course.
Yeah, I'm guessing he has in mind, like, refutation is ambiguous because you have mutual refutation. So the fact that they each refute each other doesn't tell you which one's better or what to do. So you need some other method. I think that's what he has in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that sort of sounds right.
Okay, and then when you replied, were you trying to reply to something like along those lines? Or did you have something else in mind? Were you not sure what he was saying? What was the goal?
I wasn't super clear. At this point, I sort of just wanted to, because this is a more exploratory part of the conversation, I just wanted to expand upon it and sort of say, yep, this is, and then sort of go into detail about what happens when you have those two, or have two theories that conflict like this. So it was more like just like a little monologue on my part about how competing ideas interact.
Yeah, I think maybe a question would have helped.
Yep. I wasn't quite sure what he was like necessarily getting at, so I didn't quite know what. I don't know what question.
You can ask what he's getting at and say you aren't quite sure what that has to do with what you're saying, for example.
Yep. I think I do it at some other points in this thing. So I'm wondering if I've seen on some of your streams where you're doing the gigahertz discussion.
Yeah.
Tagging stuff with different colors and things. And I was
Oh, yeah, you can tag by author.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the other day how I would do this, and I didn't actually end up looking into it too much, but I do have some ideas I can do quickly.
Is there an actual tag system in that app or not?
Not one that looks. So there is a way to, so you can attach various things to it. So um, so you can attach links and notes and stuff like that. I don't know if you can put like a little colored, or you can do icons as well. So I could tag it like like something like that.
Right.
But I mean, there's like little people.
Yeah, color is fine too. Or just writing people's names.
One thing I can do is I can style the things. All right. I'll use green hats for me. Red hats for tag. Okay.
So, very big picture. I think he's kind of saying that will work sometimes, but not always. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That seems
Like
like a
he's not
reasonable.
trying to raise an objection why your approach would never work of refuting ideas. He's trying to say like there are hard cases.
Yeah. So one thing I in the oh, sorry, you can't see what I'm saying. In the thread or in the message he's replying to, I bring up the sort of a version of the you want to get a pet, what do you do example.
Uh-huh.
And sort of go through that. So that's might be one of the things he's replying to, but that's halfway through the post as well. But yeah, so we think his claim is, oops.
Okay, so let's look at this one first. When you say this, is this going to change his mind, or does it counter his position well?
So sort of like don't think it'd change his mind, but like one of the things that's curious about me is I sort of like threw that on because I didn't think that the case where both are wrong is something that's particularly important. Like if they've both got refutations, but those refutations are both incorrect because they're like deeply involved in the theories and the theories are incorrect, then I don't think there's like an epistemic problem there. If both are wrong, you just end up with no options and no criticisms after eliminating them. I mean, he replies with a like to that line with is sort of dismissive.
Okay, and then what's this one doing?
So I think it's pointing out that we're like it's not a particularly interesting case if we have theories A and B and A criticizes B but B doesn't criticize A. Like the fact that B is unable to make criticisms for A.
Yeah, I think
it's
So
not
he's
really
talking about
applying to
A
his.
criticizes B and B criticizes A. And then you're saying, what if A doesn't criticize B, right? Or are you trying to talk about something else? Because it seems like not the scenario
Yeah,
he's talking about.
yeah, no, that's right. It doesn't directly reply to what he's talking about. I mean, I guess in terms of, so only like the first and last thing I say are directly relevant. Like essentially, if both are wrong, then we don't really have a problem. But otherwise, we can
We
use
still have a
their,
problem of how to figure this out.
yes, that's true. So we do end up talking down a thread about that. So maybe, should we see where that goes or?
Okay, so you say it's a good thing. He was trying to present it as a problem, right? And then you're saying it's a good thing?
I guess, yeah. He sort of hasn't explicitly said it's a problem, but I guess um, I mean, one of the things, so fraught was a word that confused me a bit in terms of, because it felt like it sort of had the conclusion baked in. But it's not directly like,
I think by fraught, he means what Popperians often call rivals, ideas that are clashing with each other. I don't think it's a very good word, but that's what I assumed he meant.
yeah, okay,
Like, things involved in conflict. So they're both theories about the same issue that contradict each other and are incompatible and, that kind of thing.
okay, yeah, I mean, it seemed like meaning something like, when I, was trying to figure it out, more like ideas that are problematic before you ever, like, because he's describing like fraught ideas. Yeah, most fraught ideas are mutually refuted. So like, I guess that somewhat makes sense, but the like most ideas that cause problems are mutually refuted. Like because like fraught ideas is describing like individual ideas in some group sort of thing, as opposed to like fraught pairs of ideas, which would make more sense.
Yeah, I think he might have just taken a pair as assumed context, or a simple case to discuss first.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I figure when he says mutually.
Yep. But definitely it's like, yeah, there's a case of two explanations that offer criticisms of each other. And decisive criticisms, no less. It sounds like.
Okay, so you kind of say four different things, and then I don't think any one of them is going to like help him understand something very well. Like
Yeah,
this
okay.
one mentions an experiment, but it doesn't explain how you come up with that experiment, or what sort of design parameters you're looking for, or how the experiment will solve the problem.
Yep. I see that.
And then you mentioned a more specific goal, um, but he probably doesn't know how goals are part of the discussion, or what a more specific goal would do to solve the problem? Like, how does that lead to progress?
Okay, yeah, I did explain further up the idea of goals in the initial thing that he replied to. It's probably not safe to assume that
Yeah.
he read it all or understood it, but yeah.
Yeah, he showed up and wrote this much with no quote.
Yeah.
And there's always like the rest of the audience. So it's generally good to write fairly generically in these kinds of situations without
Yep.
assuming a bunch of context.
Yeah. I was trying to balance between. I realized that some of my replies got pretty lengthy. I'm not sure if that they're really that lengthy or just that the quotation or the quote system and things means it like gets padded out a lot, like with the way they lay it out.
So overall, I read this comment as say some thoughts on the general topic being discussed rather than like really a specific reply to a specific point.
Yep. Yep, no, I agree.
I think that's pretty common, and it's often unlabeled. And like people often do that and they think that that's how you argue points. And they don't know the difference. And so it can help if you want to do that. One of the things you can do is label it and explain why you're doing it. Like you can say, I'm not really sure what your specific point is. So maybe you could clarify more. Here are some of my like thoughts adjacent to your topic that might help us get moving. And yeah, I think that kind of introduction would help show awareness of what's going on and would help him know what's going on and so on.
Yep. No, I agree. That would have been good.
Okay. These kind of replies are a bit awkward because they don't go in a tree very well. Like they don't flesh out a tree of like, here's the argument, here's the reply to that. Because they're just sort of talking.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's good to try to keep awareness of how well what you're saying would actually form a debate tree. And whether it's intended to. Because there's certainly reasons to say other things that are not meant as debate replies. But yeah, keeping track of which is which and labeling them or like having language that helps communicate what you're doing, I think makes a big difference.
Yep. We get more quotey from this point on, which is good.
Okay. So I think, what do you think this sentence is for?
So it's a bit general in that it's sort of bringing two of them together. But I think it's replying to what I said first, predominantly. So like we've got theories A and B that refute each other, and then the first thing I talk about is like that relationship, and it's a good thing because we can make progress, compare the two ideas, come up with an experiment.
Right. So you
That'll
say good thing, and then he says bad thing.
yeah. So that's a pretty good
trying
link.
to reply and debate.
Yeah, so he points out 2 bad things. I only actually reply to one of them, I think.
Okay, do you know why he brought both of them up, or what he's trying to do?
Well, I think the second one is pointing out like a case that I haven't dealt with in the first thing. It's bad if ideas can't be criticized at all. I see as like a far more general, on the same page sort of comment. Like if we disagree about that, that might be more serious. But yeah, but I don't disagree with that. But I'm not sure why it's particularly relevant.
So he thinks that you're happy that the ideas criticize each other at all. This gives us the opportunity to make progress, learn things, etc. And so he's trying to tell you that he agrees that the fact that you can criticize anything at all is like useful and important. If criticism was just impossible, we'd be in trouble. So the first part is like acknowledging what he thinks you're saying and partially agreeing with it. And the second part, I think, is trying to re-explain this, which he thinks is not really answered. So he's trying a different way to make the same point.
Yeah, I feel like it's a significant sort of expansion on that point though, in that like refuting, one and the other, or mutual refutation, there's no reason that has anything to do with like a cyclic or recursive thing.
Well,
Oh well, I guess unless he's like, yeah,
I mean, this is what mutual refutation is, right? There's a criticism going from A to B and a criticism going from B to A.
yep. There might be one thing that occurs to me. So this word cyclic. So I think it might mean different things for us reading it now.
It goes in a circle because you're like, B refused A, ha. And then the guy's like, no, but A refused B. And then you just keep going back and forth.
Yeah, so in thinking about, I can sort of see why someone would say that. I don't think it's cyclical because the cycle is only like complete if both of them are right type thing. Otherwise, if either of them were correct, then the cycle like immediately stops. So it doesn't seem like
Well,
that's
the point
that
is
what I
each
was.
one claims to be correct, but how do you sort it out?
Yeah.
It's like a he said, she said kind of.
So yeah, so I, at least in responding to that, I do mention like infinite regress as like a term.
Yeah, it's not actually a regress in this case because you don't have like lower levels. An infinite regress is like
Yeah, so what I was thinking was like, so A is wrong because explanation one, and then like, well, explanation one is wrong. I mean, because A refutes it or whatever else, and it's like, okay, but if that's a thing, then here's a different, criticism or an altered thing, and then, but that's wrong because blah. But that's, and so that sort of like back and forward is what I was imagining, which I don't think is necessarily what Tag was thinking of.
I think he's saying each one just has one reason, or maybe a
Yeah,
few, but one will do. B has one reason that from its perspective, A is just totally wrong and crap, and we should throw A out. Then A has an argument that says, on my premises, B is totally wrong and crap. Like, if I'm right, B's crap, and B's like, well, if I'm right, A's crap. And then how
yep.
do you sort that out?
So we do start asking about examples for this. So as we go down.
Okay, so he's trying to raise this problem of cyclic criticism. And then he also says some other things. Example of independent criticism, and for some reason he thinks this is skepticism. That's kind of an odd reply because sometimes both ideas are wrong. Like, I think he might be confused about why you said it. So then he's making wrong conclusions about your motivation. Like, if it seems a little pointless to him, he might be trying to fill in the gaps for you and read between the lines.
Yep.
So that can cause trouble, because I don't think he's doing a good job of it in this case. Okay, so you reply to everything. Okay, so what were you thinking here? What's this reply supposed to do?
So at this point, I think I've sort of got an idea of what he means, maybe, but well, no, I mean the infinite regress sort of points out that I think I've got the wrong idea, but I'm asking for an example because I'm not quite sure what the issue that he's trying to raise is. So if he had an example of that issue, then we could talk about that to figure out whether it's like actually a problem or not.
Okay, so he hasn't explained his position enough, you haven't explained your position enough, and you guys are talking past each other a bit?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, but you've asked for an example, so maybe that'll help.
He asked for an example in the previous one as well. So
yeah,
I think that, yeah.
Okay, so now we see that. What did you say?
So this is a
Okay, so why did you pick this example?
Because it so I was actually looking for something different, but found that because the example is, so it's an argument that's self-contained and doesn't rely on like other things from, it doesn't rely on like foundations of critical rationalism or things like that. At least as far as I could tell at the time. So I picked that example because it was like, because Popper made it, and I guess founded CR sort of thing, or whatever we want to call it. But sort of started that. This is a criticism that he offered of a competing epistemology, but the criticism doesn't rely on his other ideas necessarily. It's consistent in a like broader sense. So just because this criticism was wrong wouldn't mean that Popper's other ideas were wrong, and vice versa. Yeah. So which is an expansion of this sort of where this thing starts from, of like we can come up with criticisms that are sort of independent of where they came from. Like because of Popper's ideas, he was thinking about this sort of stuff and came up with other things, but they don't directly depend on it.
There are a few issues with the example. Can you think of any downsides with choosing it?
Yeah, so a big downside is that he doesn't agree with it, which came up as an issue.
Yeah.
Yep. That I think sort of gets resolved a bit in the next two messages, because he offers an example, or his argument of why he thinks it's a bad example is in and of itself an example of what I was trying to show. So I sort of like ignore that. I mean, I try to sort of, I mean,
Okay.
this reason was why I put the parenthetical below it as well.
Yeah, any other downsides to this example?
it's a complex example. It's one that like there's already a lot of pre-existing discussion on this sort of stuff. LessWrong are going to be like have sort of established positions. So there's like other ideas that are going to come into play that aren't actually relevant. Yeah.
Okay, it's also long and abstract and uses math.
Yep.
So those are all significant downsides as well. I think it would work better to try to think of like a minimal example. What are the minimum features an example needs in order to make your point? And then, don't have an example with extra stuff in it that's not required. So, like, could you come up with an example that was like 3 sentences and only use simple concepts like, desks and chairs and rulers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably could. It's one of the reasons that I'm somewhat like the simplicity of arguments can sometimes like people sometimes react negatively to really simple arguments. So I'm not sure how that would have gone. That was maybe one of the reasons I didn't try and do that. I was trying to think about it as in terms of stuff like that. I guess part of it was that because I've got all this pre-existing knowledge about various stuff like this, it felt easy just to pick something from there. Because that's what I was thinking about when I was writing it.
Yeah,
It's not
you're
necessarily
picking something that seems sort of easy for for you,
yeah.
but not for him.
Yep.
That makes it harder. Also, I think people usually don't complain about simple examples.
Okay. I might might have overestimated the importance of that then. Or the downside.
How many sentences is this?
Well, one, really.
Yeah,
Sort of
and how many grammar errors?
um
A couple?
in
This
terms
is
of well,
hard to read.
yeah.
Like,
Um
if you try reading it, do you see any problems?
well that's so the first time I reread it, it wasn't like well, I mean I wrote it so I've sort of got a pretty decent idea of what it meant. But yeah, just trying to reread it more closely then there's problems. So
Do you want to do a grammar tree for it? Or just do a quick look over it?
yeah, no, I was just thinking of doing like a quick look. So got like an implied conjunction between these two things, and then the IE has like an implied conjunction somewhere as well. Oh wow. So in terms of like grammatical errors, I'm not like, I think it's like it's problematic as a sentence, but I'm not sure there's like outright errors in there.
What about this comma?
So yeah, I think that's like a semicolon would have been better. But it's separating clauses.
Yeah,
Probably should have just
so
been period actually.
yeah, I'd go with a period. A semicolon would also be better. But a comma here is actually just incorrect. It's not like inelegant.
It's actually wrong.
It's just joining two clauses with a comma.
Yep.
Okay, and then when you read the beginning and you get this far.
Yeah, so I've got this like so yeah, so that's like a noun in of itself. So there's it's like I am, and then so not, but suggesting anything I said. Was it the was and everything afterwards till the comma is a modifier? No, that's all right, so there's
So the sentence has a problem where you can start reading it two different ways. Like
yeah.
you can imagine if there's a period here, you could actually read this. I'm not suggesting anything I said, period. And
Yep.
it has a meaning. So people will start to read it that way. And then when you get more words, you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. And then you have to backtrack and try to figure out what it was supposed to mean.
Yep.
So that's causing trouble. Then also, there's a missing that here, which is not strictly wrong, but it adds to the difficulty of figuring things out because there's an omitted word.
I think you could actually have two. I'm not
Or
sure if
maybe
you can have
that
both.
should be here.
Yeah. Not suggesting that anything I said, but it could also be I'm not suggesting that anything that I said, I think is still valid
Yeah,
grammar.
okay. So right, you can put that in one place, two places, or the other place. There's like three options for how to fill in the implied words. So that also causes difficulty. Are there more of them later?
There's, well, sort of. So when I say
Yeah.
like a reason to think both theories wrong, really it's like a reason to think that that both theories are wrong.
Right. So there's a bunch of missing words that, if it's only one or two, often it's not that hard to figure out what someone meant. But the more things you pack into the same sentence, the harder it gets to untangle.
Yeah.
So I would suggest when you write things, try to keep it simple and make sure it's clear and just like write less stuff and get it right instead of writing more complicated stuff and having errors. Like start slow and minimal and then add more complexity when you can do it without causing trouble, rather
Yep.
than starting hard in the deep end and then trying to fix it. It's similar to typing practice. Are you familiar with that example that I've talked about?
Sort of, I think. I mean, just in terms of like the automation autopilot stuff.
So also, you want to type slow and correctly first and then speed up, rather than
Yep.
typing fast and incorrectly and then trying to fix accuracy second. You
Yep.
want accuracy first, speed second. So it's very similar to say something clear and correct and reasonable first, and then add complexity second in a way that doesn't ruin the first thing. Like when you speed up your typing, you want to speed up in a way that you don't start making a bunch of typos.
Yep. I remember the other day actually that so in like grades 9 and 10, I took sports science as an elective, and one of the interesting things that we did early on was learning to juggle. So this is like, from the point of view of like if you were coaching a sports team or something like that, what sort of learning techniques do you use? And anyway, the class was split in two, and half the class, I was in this first group, did like practicing by parts, I think they called it. And the other class or the other half did like practicing the whole. So out of the, dozen or so people on the, or less than that, the six or so on the other side, like only one of them managed to learn to juggle by the end of like the 50-minute thing. And then on the other side, practicing to do it in parts where, so like, just a 3-ball thing, you start with 1 ball and then you do 2 with the motion and you get that down. And then you do 3, you introduce the third one. Anyway, it was curious that like some of the best like advice that I've received on learning was from, yeah, sports science in high school. But it's exactly this sort of thing in that pick small parts and master those parts and then add complexity as you go.
Yeah, I don't think it's that curious because that's a context that's fairly concrete. It's not all that complicated. They get a lot of feedback on what works and doesn't work. Um, both from like
And
the
the
people like having a good time or a bad time or thinking they made progress or not, as well as you can just see the results. So like, did this person become good at juggling? They get like a lot of practice testing out different methods. So it's not too surprising that they would know a few things.
it's also like it's decisive in a similar way to like mathematics in that when you get it right, there's a lot of feedback for getting it right. Sort of thing. It's you can't because sporting stuff is typically pretty decisive. It's hard to fool yourself about being good when you're not. Um, so it sort of makes sense that that context would play into it. But yeah, I guess it was surprising that that sports science was a part of it. Um, yeah. Anyway, the using like that with um, it's a pretty poorly constructed sentence.
Yeah, there's a few more things. Like I'm not sure why it says both suggesting and said. Um, those both are sort of
Yeah.
like versions of said.
Um, yeah. If I said implying instead, like I'm not implying anything. I said um,
I don't think you need both. Like, couldn't you just say nothing I said was?
yes. Yeah. That would be much clearer. I could get rid of 2 of the that's.
And like we probably don't need the to think either.
Yeah. That gets rid of another that.
And there's a that here. Yeah, so things like this don't work very well. I think it's pretty important.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a motivation issue, like, because it doesn't read the same as your other parts, and then, oh wow, they don't have double quoting. They don't have nested
No.
quoting that actually works.
I have to. It's not even that. If you try to double quote them, it'll only single quote. You have to put a space and then the character, and then you can sort of double quote, um, like double nested quote. Yeah.
Oh, that's
It's
awful.
it's a real pain. The copy pasting just doesn't work at all when you start doing that. You've got to basically build up the quote from scratch again.
Oh yeah, and you just, right, they don't have copy pastable quotes. You can't just, there's no good way to reply to someone.
Well, you can, like, their stuff, if you copy their stuff and paste it, then I think it shows up as a quote. Or if you copy a quote from their stuff, it shows up as a quote. One of them works. Yeah, so, and then, I mean, it's, yeah. I get
Like,
the
if you
feeling that,
compare it to my blog like this, where you can just copy paste this,
yeah. Well,
it,
I actually, that was one part that during the analyzing lie stuff that you talked about, like, as in, like, gone to the effort of making sure that the what is displayed is the same as the markdown or the markup language type thing, because it's a subset of markdown. But yeah, being able to do that, I think, is really valuable, and it's not something that I've ever seen anywhere before. It makes so much sense. Oh, besides email, of course, that would be the one
yeah,
counterexample.
it basically works in email, and then no one on the web has it.
No, well, it's not. It's not flashy. Yeah, it's. I don't think people. That's one of the things. People don't quote like that. They don't
Reddit
copy
has
stuff out.
nested quoting, and people use multi-layered quotes.
Oh, that's true.
You do have to do it manually, like you can't just copy paste it, but it does work. And you see
Yeah.
it on bulletin board forums like PHPBB. People will
Yes.
use
Yeah.
nested quotes on those, and those are it's often like quite a hassle to do them with the markup language or whatever. Or no, it's a
Well,
hassle to split them up. If you don't
yes.
split the quotes up at all, it's not that bad.
I think a PHPBB and like vBulletin and stuff like that usually have like a quote button that'll put the entire post in the quote thing
Yeah,
already. Um, and that's one of the reasons nested quotes are so common, because if someone's, you just go through these quote chains. Um, but yeah, um, no, that's true. There is like a fair amount there. People don't care about it when it's not there, I guess, is the thing. Like emails with the way that people just top reply to everything and don't do inline replies. And many email clients like don't format inline replies very well now. Um,
yeah, it's been getting worse over time. Anyways, right, what I wanted to say is I wondered if there's a motivation issue or like an attitude issue. Because, like, these ones are written differently than this one. And the things you're replying to are different. This was like the worst thing he said right here. You know?
yeah.
Like he's accusing you of vulgar skepticism. His comment doesn't he did not understand what he said, and now he's saying something a bit aggressive or hostile or insulting, right?
Yeah.
So do you think you were like annoyed or you saw it as low quality or something? So then that's why you wrote a more careless response to it?
Yeah, I think probably low quality is more that, like, I was just annoyed that it was like, why is this a thing? Like, um, I didn't see it as valuable or as making any real point. I saw it as obviously like misinterpreting what I said, um, which is why I just replied about what I said. Um, so I'm sort of
Yeah,
like slightly
so
defensive there.
yeah, why not just ignore it and like don't respond at all?
That's, yeah, probably a better. I do that a little bit later, I think. I've done that a bit in some other posts I've made.
You can also write like a very short sentence like um I'm not advocating skepticism. Like if you think there's an important misunderstanding, you can make a claim about it really quickly.
Yeah, yep.
And if you want to hedge it a bit, you can say I'm not trying to advocate skepticism. Like something like my intention is not to advocate skepticism. So you've got some options for very short wordings, even if you want to be more hedgy about it. It's not my goal to advocate skepticism. I don't think my position implies skepticism, etc.
Yep.
Okay, so to sum up, we've got three sections. How did this reply go? What are the main things that happened?
So I think excluding the last one, the reply was okay. The first thing is like the first paragraph is the best paragraph, in that it's like bringing something up. It's like context in case I've like misunderstood something. There's like directly a place to go, and it's not super problematic. The second one is on the lesser side of okay, in that the example is not a great example. I could have come up with something, and I mean, yeah, the parenthetical is almost like is me acknowledging that it's not like that. I've sort of seen problems with it. So that's maybe a signal I should pay attention to in future. If I need a parenthetical, maybe there's a better example or a better thing to do. So there's problems with that, but it does move the discussion forward a bit. And then the third is like just low quality in general, replying to something that's low quality. And yeah, it doesn't really help us move forward much.
So this is a mess. Did he
Yeah,
like quote the wrong thing?
I asked and he didn't reply to that. Sort of said,
So you said, do you have an example? Which he then did not quote and did not answer?
no, he didn't either do either of those things.
Well, that's unfortunate. Okay, so what's he trying to say here?
So yeah, so I say, I can't think of an example of infinite regress except arbitrary sort of cases, where there are other options. And his reply to that is the options need to be acceptable to both parties.
Yeah, it doesn't seem realistic to me that he could expect you to understand his position based on this additional sentence of information.
I don't see why it's got like the exclamation mark struck me as weird in that it doesn't seem, this seems like more like just a comment that you'd put on the side. I mean, I agree with, like, the first thing I say is agreeing with it.
I read
Um,
it as him disagreeing with you. I think he's trying to argue with you. Like I think he's saying I think he's trying to make a point. Like he thinks you missed something. Which is weird because you were saying like, do you have an example? I can't think of an example of what you're saying. And then he's acting like you made a claim.
yeah. Which I mean, there is like, you could, a related and strong claim would be something like, no cases of infinite regress exist where there aren't other options. But I'm not really like making that claim. I'm trying to like figure out whether, like, get to the bottom of this sort of thing with him, as opposed to, yeah.
So in your
Because
tree, I'd suggest splitting up the do you have an example question for two reasons. One is his reply like explicitly doesn't quote that part, and two, then you'll have a leaf node where you asked him a question and then there's no response.
yeah,
And leaf nodes are like a meaningful part of trees where you can try to see what didn't get followed up on.
yeah,
So it's nice to have that visible.
yeah. No, this is. Um,
Okay, yeah, so he says this and it's kind of nonsensical. Then this one, my first guess is he quoted the wrong thing and he was trying to copy paste this thing. What?
yeah, that sort of makes more sense. The fact that he didn't go and fix it up later, though, in terms of like, I replied saying, um, like, you didn't quote an example. I'm unsure if you meant to quote a different part.
Yeah,
So right at the
so
bottom of that, yeah.
I think it was related to this. My demo pro crashed. Um,
Oh, no worries.
but yeah, this part.
So I think
That's
that's what we
like
end up talking about as well
it
down that
seems
track.
like it would make the most sense as a response to that. And it just crashed again. Okay, so we have this weird response. Okay, so now you're trying to sort out the mess, and I think you would have been better off significantly trying to minimize the mess in the first place and high effort at the beginning and try to keep the conversation under control and organized rather than letting it get out of hand and then trying to clean it up. And there are like rational reasons for that, or like discussion reasons. Like there are good reasons for that, but then there's also a second issue, psychological reasons. Like once the discussion seems chaotic or lower quality or something, the other people often get more careless or give up or stop trying as much, that kind of thing. So then it gets really hard to fix because of the attitude issues, which we saw partly from you here, where the discussion was starting to go downhill, then he said something awful, and then you wrote a low quality response to that, so it's spiraling.
Even though we haven't really continued that thing, it's sort of, yeah, poisoned the waterhole as such. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole discussion hasn't gotten very far yet. Like, you're not actually talking about any of the examples yet. And the examples are needed just to get on the same page about what the claims are. Like, there's claims, and then you don't understand each other's claims, and then you need examples, and then you're just sort of having too much transaction costs to get things moving along very much. And people are pretty sensitive to that, and like they just run out of patience pretty fast. So you don't have like a ton of patience to just take your time with getting to the point in general. You know, there should be more forums that are more patient, and because if you have a difficult time getting to the point and figuring it out and so on, then there's a lot of value in doing it slowly because it'll help you in your future conversations. That's how you learn and get better at conversation, is you muddle through it and you sort everything out and figure out what actually happened. And then next time you'll understand what's going on better. So you need like forums where people are actually trying to learn and are patient with each other. But what happens a lot is people try to muddle through it and then they run out of patience and stop, and then they never sort out what went wrong, why did this not work, how could I have done better, etc. So then the next conversation comes along and they don't know how to do better. Like every time it goes wrong and then they don't go through it thoroughly enough to figure out what happened.
Yep.
So the persistent lack of persistence really sabotages the learning.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are signs here that that kind of thing might happen soon. You know, it would not be surprising if he just stopped replying at any point around here.
Yeah, so it does. There was some other replies, or there was one other reply further, like in a different spot in the conversation, where it's definitely like you can see a lot of that.
Yeah, so we haven't read this carefully yet, but it looks like you're now investing effort into trying to improve the conversation right around when he might be giving up, which is an inefficient time to put effort in because there's a good chance of failure despite the effort. And making a bunch of errors and then fixing them is harder than being more careful and minimizing errors in the first place.
Yep.
Not like 100% minimizing, like you can go overboard on safety measures, but the most efficient thing is trying to keep them like pretty low in the first place.
Yeah. Well, just thinking about it, like if I was going to put in the effort anyway when this happened, then I should have put it in earlier, because it means that the rest of the conversation is higher yield.
Yeah, whatever you do tends to have some effect on the whole rest of the conversation afterwards.
Yep.
The earlier messages have more leverage.
Yep.
On average, because they have more messages after them. And also, if you think about it in terms of a tree, the higher nodes don't just have more messages after them chronologically, they have more messages in their subtree. Like
Depend on them. So it's like quality issues at the top will yeah, have like flow-on effects.
like number 1 has far more in its subtree than number 2, even though number 2 is only a little later chronologically. The earlier it is, the larger subtree it tends to get, in addition to the more just bulk raw number of messages later.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so there's kind of a topic sentence issue here. Like, I think this is the most important thing that you're saying. I don't get why you said this. Like, I don't know what's going on. And what you don't even say is, I asked for an example. If you don't give me an example, I don't think we're going to figure this out. But at least this is trying to move things forward. Like, you were saying something, and then he gave you an answer, and you have no idea what he's talking about. But you de-emphasized it by making it the second sentence in a paragraph instead of the first sentence. And it's not a direct question or a direct request. It's a statement about yourself, which also de-emphasizes it compared to please explain what you're talking about, or compared to like a direct question about what he's talking about.
Yep. It means that for the conversation to improve on that subtree, he's got to guess what I meant like reasonably well, which is as opposed to a direct request or something where.
Yeah. So what you're not doing here is highlighting that his response here was inadequate to your response above it. So there's a need to backtrack.
Yep.
Like, your point should be that you consider your prior message still unanswered. You don't see how this is an answer, so you still need an answer. And that's not clear enough. So this might not really go anywhere. Do you want to say anything else about this comment, or should we just keep going? Any questions?
Oh, that whole thing.
Yeah, the rest is just sort of like trying to clarify his very confusing misquote.
So the one thing that so that like the last paragraph there is like I say I did give you an example, but then also a general like, and then I give another example. It's an abstract one, but that's trying to at least deal with the issue of whether like the concrete bits of an example are true or not, like in terms of Popper's criticism.
Yeah, so again, this is nothing like a minimal example or a simplest example.
Mm.
It's It's abstract. It's something people could easily be confused about.
Yep.
It also doesn't explicitly deal with the cycle issue. Because you're only talking about a criticism in one direction.
Yeah, this is on the branch about criticisms that are sort of independent of where they came from.
Yeah, but like I think I understand what you're trying to do, but he thinks his main point is there's this cycle problem, and now you're giving him this abstract example that doesn't even have a cycle in it. And I don't think he's following the discussion tree super well. And so I don't think this is going to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so what do you make of this response?
I was really surprised by that. I did not think that was like the point that he was trying to make. I can sort of see it, given our conversation like earlier, I can see it more, but it still seems like way out of the blue and not like he hasn't really explained it or anything like that, or even why that's relevant. I'm not sure I actually responded to it. No, I don't think I did,
Ah,
because yeah.
okay,
Which
so I know what's going on here.
mhm.
This response didn't surprise me, but anyways, so when you say relevant and when he says relevant, you're referring to different things. So when you say relevant, what do you mean relevant to? Because you don't explicitly say. So like when you say relevant, you're saying like why is this a child of this parent, basically? Right?
Yep.
Right. So what is the parent that you were questioning the relevance to?
So we're talking about examples of infinite regress. Then the other options need to be acceptable to both parties, and it's sure, or they need to be able to resolve a disagreement on what's acceptable. But why, um, like, why is there disagreement about like the acceptability of an option particularly relevant here? Like, why is that? Why does that have anything to do um, with like examples of infinite regress?
Right. So you're saying that uh, this one does not make sense as a child of this one. How are these two related?
Yep.
Okay. And then when he says relevance, what is he talking about? Do you know?
So, so the guarantee that any dispute is resolvable is talking about like a way that, uh, like to end the regression, um, or further up the tree. I'm not sure. Like, it could be. I can see it being applied particularly to like a regressive sort of issue, um, but he could be trying to make a bigger point as well, and quoting like isn't telling me what that's related to via quoting something else.
Yeah, so he's quoting the thing he's directly responding to. Like he's responding to this message. But then when he
Yeah.
talks about relevance, I think what he's saying is that this text, my drawing thing keeps crashing. So I think that he's saying that is relevant to this text, the root node. He's going all the way fucking back. I think he's trying to relate it to the original topic. He's saying, why does this claim matter to the original topic? So when he says both parties, it's quite confusing because originally you weren't talking about parties, you were talking about ideas. But people often go back and forth or whatever between like idea A and idea B versus like advocate A and advocate B who has a particular point of view that favors them. But I think he switched to a model where there's two people debating, and what he's saying is in order to resolve one of these mutual refutation situations, you need to find some sort of option that makes sense from both points of view. In other words, A and B can both agree to it. So that's why this statement, if you just take it completely out of context, these alternative options for refutation have to be acceptable to both sides. You can't just say, I'm going to make a claim B disagrees with that refutes B to resolve the problem. You have to come up with something that A and B both agree makes sense, that then resolves the problem. That's what he's trying to say. So
which
it's
actually,
relevant to his original thing.
That's like, yeah, that's a much better point than anything I read out of it. Like, I agree with that.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, but the thing is, he said it in response to you, and when he said it, it was irrelevant. So you were asking about the relevance because it had nothing fucking to do with what you said. And then he's like, it's relevant to the original topic. If we just take this claim totally out of context, it's a reasonable point about the original point. And it's like, it's a big jump though, because you asked him for an example, and then he made a claim about the original topic, and then you were like, how is that relevant? And he's like, it's relevant to the original topic. And you still haven't gotten your example where you could actually understand what he was talking about. So I think that he didn't understand what you meant when you questioned relevance, though. I think that's what happened. See, when you said, I'm not particularly sure why that's relevant, though, I think what he heard was, you're lost, you don't understand why that statement has anything to do with the topic at hand. So now he's trying to tell you why the statement is related to the topic. He's trying to tell you why it's on topic, which is not what you're asking. You're asking why that child was related to its parent. So he just wrote a non sequitur.
This
that
is
was still also on the general topic.
Yeah, the other thing is that, like, so I'm replying, like, what he's replying to now is my reply to his confusing post where he's quoted the same thing twice accidentally. And so I've had to try and think about what he was actually trying to quote, or like what point he's trying to make. So, like, of course I'm confused.
Yeah. I'm wondering, when you try to double quote, if he even knows what that is. Like, he seems to not really be interpreting quoting properly. I don't know if he understands quotes. So I think, like, you're trying to communicate partially via quoting, and he's not getting it.
I can sort of see that.
So you just gave up on this part?
So, I didn't think it was like, my, like, response to that, well, my thinking in that point is like, okay, you don't need to guarantee that, like, any arbitrary disputes are resolvable for, like, a theory of epistemology to be okay. It doesn't need to deal with, like, things that you're not going to encounter in, like, the universe. It's like, to explain why, like, we can resolve things arbitrarily involves a whole bunch of prerequisite stuff that he's going to disagree with anyway. Like, I think I could, like, try and argue this point that, like, arbitrary disagreements are resolvable. But I'm not sure they're relevant, and there's a lot of pre-existing stuff before that.
It is the wrong point to be talking about, because he brought up a common case. Mutually refuting ideas is a common case. You run into it all the time. So that was a completely reasonable challenge. It was not, you can't make guarantees about every edge case. He was bringing up a very practical problem that was good to bring up. But now he's making a comment about guarantees and edge cases and so on. And if you go off into that, things are going to get worse. What you need to be doing is talking about what is a simple example of this common case of mutually refuting ideas, and then what can we do about it? And then if he agrees on your example, then you can talk about how to generalize the method so it applies in lots of cases. Because, there are many different examples that could be brought up, so you need to deal with, like, many somehow. So you have to find some sort of pattern, like, go through 3 examples and then refactor the pattern out or something.
Yeah, I mean, more to the point, if his issue with critical rationalism is that it can't guarantee like the resolution of disputes, then I don't know why he's spent like this time introducing these other things and asking for examples and whatever else about other cases. It sort of seems like he suddenly remembered the point that he was trying to make 3 days ago.
Yeah, I think, well, okay, first of all, I don't think it's sudden. I think he's had it in mind
Okay.
the whole time. This is very common, that people are always trying to bring discussions back to the root node, or to what they see as the main topic or main point, rather than following and resolving sub-branches. It's a very typical discussion strategy. I think one of the reasons people have learned to do that is they've discovered sub-branches usually don't resolve. They just branch more. They branch faster than things get resolved. You never get back to the main topic unless you just sort of say, I'm going to ignore all these details now and go back to the main point. So they just sort of do that periodically.
Yep.
And like the more you don't do that, the more they get annoyed with you and see you as like straying too far away from the main topic.
Yep. Yep.
They sort of lack patience for trees with very much depth to them, and so it's very hard to talk to them about complicated things because of that. And both of you have not done a great job of focusing and making the conversation go like at a high rate to get things figured out, which is perfectly understandable. It's hard to do that, but then he doesn't have the patience for it. I think he's blaming you, but it's both of you. Like it's not all you. He is also not doing a great job of keeping things focused or understanding what you're saying or whatever. Like there's a mutual conversation is hard. It's a mutual issue, and then he's out of patience, I think.
Yep.
And he's trying to jump back to the root node and repeat his main point for like the 4th time without ever explaining the details of it after you asked him for an example.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, by the way, there's going to be some. So at the end of the post, just above that, so I give this abstract case, which I think we need to put in the tree because he replies to it.
Yeah.
He doesn't really reply. Like, I mean, the main thing is that he. Oh, he does.
Yeah, I see this. This is not a very good reply, but it's okay. Like you could work with it potentially. It's hard to understand, but I think I know what you mean.
I mean, for me, that was like a pretty big red flag sort of thing that, like, I don't think this is an important point. I don't think it's like why is, so, I mean, my reply to this, I think it's actually the first thing I say, because it was such a, like, it stuck out to me as such a, like, an egregious sort of thing.
Okay, so before we move on, regarding this part, like, so I read this and I immediately knew what he meant, knew why he was saying this, knew what was going on, knew how you were talking past each other. Like I had a whole analysis, right? So what I think is notable is that I am doubtful that I could fix this conversation, even though I knew what happened. Like if it was me instead of you. Despite knowing exactly what was going on, I don't think it's fixable, realistically.
Oh, this is as in, like, this is what Tag's saying with this comment.
Right, like I understood what happened, the whole chain of the misunderstandings, but I still don't think if I was taking your place in this conversation, I'd be able to fix it.
Yep.
it should be fixable. It's not that complicated what happened. You can sort it out. But based on my experience, like I would estimate the chance of this being fixed with my skill level as well under half. Not very good.
Yep.
So I think that's important. Like the sort of mess you're in is more than I would expect to fix with people on the internet.
Yep. Yep. I sort of come to that conclusion later on, too.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it doesn't seem super hard to fix. Like I explained it took a few minutes, but in practice, it seems to be really hard to fix those things. What I would suggest you do for your next conversation is make an idea tree as you go along the entire way, and try to keep it organized the whole time. You don't necessarily have to show it to the other person. You can do it either way. Like, it can be part of the conversation, you can share it and so on, or you can just keep one yourself for notes to help you figure out what you're doing. But do one of those. Yeah, and not just your next one. Like I recommend it as like a common thing you do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that seems it seems like a good thing. I don't see any reason it wouldn't be a good thing.
Yeah, it'll help you make it clear when things are turning into a mess. Like if you don't know where things go in the tree, or things look like non sequiturs in the tree, or you see leaf nodes that seem important and are getting ignored, you can start picking up on what's going on hopefully sooner, and have more of a chance to sort it out before it spirals.
Yep.
Right, so now you're running into pushback on your example, and he's not actually responding to the purpose of the example. This is very common. You give an example for a particular purpose, and then they respond, what are my thoughts on this thing, just in general? And they have trouble understanding that you brought it up in a very specific context.
Yes, yeah.
Which is one of the reasons to use simpler examples in the first place that don't have a bunch of unnecessary baggage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely lose patience a bit, or start losing patience after this point.
Oh. Well, you lasted longer than him, I think.
Yeah, I sort of there's one post of losing a bit of patience, and then the one after that is I think multiple times. I'm not sure if multiple times in this post, but I basically I'm pointing out that I don't think there's any point talking about this, or I don't see any reason to believe that this discussion is going to go anywhere.
I'm gonna reply with a video link later, unless you want to.
Oh yeah, to this video link. I was
Yeah,
thinking about
I'll reply to
yeah.
this comment, or you can, up to you.
Oh, either or. I'm not fussed. I'm happy to. I'm happy for you to. Doesn't really bother me.
Okay, you can go ahead then.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we talked about other stuff at the beginning, so using a timestamp would be good.
Yeah, I've taken a few timestamps.
Yeah, not just giving the timestamp, but you can direct link the timestamps once it gets processed. Or sometimes it works earlier, but if we go at all over 2 hours, then the timestamps will move a little when it processes.
Oh, that's annoying.
Because it keeps the last 2 hours, so it makes it hard to find timestamps.
Mm. So one thing, just for the sake of clarity, when you were talking about, Tag's comment, the further down, the CR can't resolve all things one,
Yeah.
irrelevance. Um, so when you're talking about that, I initially thought you were talking about like yourself from your perspective, and then I, for a brief period, thought you were talking about like what Tag was thinking writing that, as in like Tag was saying that he could see that this was like this was the relevant issue, but that he didn't think it was like worth fixing the conversation. And then I swapped back with what you said directly after that. But I think when you were talking about that, was the entire thing you were saying from your perspective and nothing from his?
Um, which part of what I was saying? I remember what I was
Um,
saying the beginning was that you and he meant different things by relevant. Are you
yeah.
talking about that part?
A bit after that, you were talking about how like you could see what the problem was, but you didn't think there was any like there was a high likelihood of even you being able to fix it, let alone us.
Yeah, that's my perspective. Like, if you gave me your password and I took over the conversation at that point, I think I personally would have a difficult time fixing it, even though I had a good understanding or a good model of what went wrong and what the
One on.
misunderstanding chain was.
Yep, yep, yep.
Like
Cool.
knowing what the misunderstandings were and actually managing to fix them are a significant distance apart in terms of difficulty.
Yep, yep.
Which is
Cool.
bad, and
Um,
that's like they shouldn't be as far apart as they are. There's something that people do wrong that makes it hard. Like they're not they don't want to fix them enough. They don't like properly try. They sabotage a little bit.
yep,
They do not value clearing up misunderstandings enough. Their strategy is sort of talk to a bunch of people, and then whichever ones don't work very well, just give up and talk to people who it's easier to talk to. And what you end up doing is talking to a bunch of people who are similar to yourself and not being very good at problem solving because you're just running away from all the problems. It's like a problem avoidance strategy because it seems easier and
yep,
because problem solving is hard. So like, yeah, if I was trying to resolve this with him, that would be problem solving, and we'd be trying to clear up a multi-step misunderstanding. We have to understand like several things, and then you can clear this up. And then at the end of the day, what do you get? Like after you clear this up, I don't think he sees like enough of a reward there. He doesn't care enough about making this conversation work because he can just more cheaply go get some other conversation with someone who is more on the same page with him to start with,
yep.
which is it contributes to tribalism and parochialism and lack of intellectual diversity and blah blah blah. So it's bad.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So he doesn't like your example, and he's not actually engaging with it in the way you intended, and it's certainly not helping him understand your point so far.
Yep. So
Bivalent
then there's
logic.
I read it as like bivalent is how I imagined it was.
Yeah, bivalent. Associated in pairs. Wait,
So
biology, chemistry.
it's sort of the meaning is somewhat clear from like what he goes on to say. So he's essentially claiming that like
Oh, here we
apparently
go.
only one and
Bivalent
zero.
logic, Wikipedia.
Oh yeah.
Every declarative sentence expressing a proposition has exactly one truth value, either true or false. Okay, so two-valued logic, right? Yeah, Popper is using two-valued logic. Oh, so that's his objection, is that it's not Bayesian probability based.
So I guess that's like I didn't bother really thinking about it too much. I think he's actually wrong, by the way. Like Popper's explicitly like multiplying two probabilities here and
Yeah,
saying that like this probability is between 0 and 1 and like exclusively.
I don't
Um
think Popper is using a different like system of rules of logic and math and probability calculus and so on that
yeah.
than the standard one that Bayesians use.
Like
Popper,
I read
like,
through
doesn't Popper literally use Bayes' theorem in this paper somewhere?
so this is like a little thing. It's like letters to nature. So
Yeah.
it's only uh but I think so what was there was something it's all pretty basic assumptions and stuff. Like it's not none of it stood out as like crazy to me. Not that I'm familiar with all the maths or anything, it just seemed pretty reasonable.
Yeah, there's a version of this in the world of Parmenides, which I think is a little bit updated. FYI.
Yeah, cool. I was actually looking for the initial thing I was looking for was the Popper and someone else did a paper on adding evidence being something like showing that like if you add evidence, it doesn't like increase. It's something like it doesn't ever increase the likelihood of something being true. It can only decrease it, or something like that. Like supporting evidence. I couldn't find it Googling it though. So, and I found this instead, which I thought was a good enough example.
Yeah, check like realism, aim of science, logic of scientific discovery. Check the world of Parmenides version of this. That could be what you wanted.
What's Parmenides?
World of Parmenides.
This thing, I think.
Yeah, this book.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it's
cool.
mostly about the pre-Socratics, but it has a version of the nature argument.
Cool.
I think it's chapter 10, including remarks.
Cool. The Kindle version is like $45. All right, I'll figure something out there. Anyway, yeah, so I didn't bother too much with his logic as to whether it was right or not, but I was happy that he said that because like my response to that part, where I quote, like in particular, it's based on bivalent logic, blah. So yeah, if you look for where I quote that, I'm trying to bring it back on topic again by using that as the example.
Yeah, I read his paragraph, and this makes no sense to me in response to an article that is using P for probability to be numbers from 0 to 1. The whole argument is using probability math.
Yeah, so
right?
it didn't make any sense to me either. I didn't bother thinking about it because it was like, it wasn't the point, and I've tried saying multiple times that it wasn't the point to this guy, or at least at this point
Like,
I have. But as an example of like whether he's right or not about that criticism, it doesn't mean
the
that like
probability
any.
is between 0 and 1.
Yeah, it's explicitly stated there. So I don't know if he's talking about, maybe he's talking about a different probability there, but he doesn't mention any equation numbers or anything else like that. He doesn't say why it's based on bivalent logic by like quoting a section. I mean, it seems pretty early on in the paper it's established that like the equation 1 there is equal to 1, but that's literally like the possibility of like something like, you know, the sum total is equal to 1 sort of thing.
I, I don't know what you mean by sum total. What Popper's saying is, assuming that your hypothesis is correct and that all of your background knowledge is correct, and that the hypothesis predicts a particular piece of evidence is guaranteed to appear, then the probability of that evidence, given those assumptions, is 1.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't say the right thing there. But yeah.
He's
But
specifically talking about a case where E is deducible from H in the presence of background knowledge B.
yeah.
Maybe that's what TAG is unhappy about, and he wants an example where E is probabilistically deducible, like you can deduce that there's an 80% probability of E, given the hypothesis and the background knowledge. Like a, say, a biased coin flip, with an 80% chance of flipping heads. Maybe he wants an example like that, and he thinks the entire world works like that.
Yeah, I mean, my reading of this, at least from memory, was that Popper's like setting this out as a case so that we can like exclude it from later stuff. So it's like when this doesn't happen, what is the relationships involved? Because otherwise it's just like everything is just 1 equals 1 equals 1 equals 1 sort of thing going down. It's meaningless. So this is like, in a very particular case, this equation equals 1. So it's just a fixed point, is all Popper's saying there. Which I think is fine in the sense that it's like, when stuff happened in the past that we know was correct, like the probability of that is 1 sort of thing. It's sort of that sort of statement. Anyway, but my response to that is, so I just quote his argument and I say, cool. So do you see how the argument you made is separate from whether inductivism is right or not?
Okay, did that work? You're trying to be clever.
No.
Right. Did you expect it to work?
I was hoping that we would get over the thing.
It's another
instead,
complicated example that has distractions in it.
So he quotes the first sentence of the second paragraph there. Your argument proposes a criticism of Popper's argument. And then he says, no, it proposes a criticism of your argument. The criticism that there is a contradiction between your claim that the paper makes no assumptions and the fact that evidently does. And so at this point, we get even more off track because he introduces the word assumptions. Basically, I use the word assumptions once, I think, in this thing. And he's like just brought this up and changed the goalposts.
What he means when he talks about the assumptions is, so you have A versus B, and they mutually disagree with each other. And you're trying to say you can find like an external thing, or at least a thing that is not based on the... I better write it down. Okay, so A refutes B, B refutes A, max. You can find a refutation C using either 1, no assumptions from A, refutation of B, or 2, only assumptions from A which are not refuted by B. Like this is what you're trying to say, right? Does this make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then tag. So you see how I use the words assumptions? So tag is trying to say you have problematic assumptions from A. Tag, you have problematic assumptions from A. You're assuming stuff that B disagrees with, like bivalent logic. So the part where he's bringing up assumptions, I can understand how it's relevant, although I don't think he's explained it well enough.
Yep.
This is a bit of a surprising response, like, because, yeah, Bayesians don't use a different system of logic. They're not opposed to true and false and so on.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a shared premise, but oh well. Like, he's either confused or he has in mind like something more specific that he hasn't explained.
Yep.
Okay, so you tried this on him and didn't work because it's another complicated example. So if
he never answers any of my questions, by the way.
That's pretty common as well. One of the things that helps with it is if you write posts that consist of one question and nothing else. However, they still frequently don't answer. And also they get offended, especially if you do that several times in a row and repeat the same question.
Yeah.
But anyways, right, so for something like this, a good test before you write a response to someone is, would I say this to an 8-year-old who I liked, who was curious about this stuff? I think if you're assuming these people are smarter than 8-year-olds in general, that's going to lead to trouble. If you just use your model of what an 8-year-old can understand, then you will write stuff that maybe they can understand.
Yeah, okay.
You do have to modify the model a little bit. Like, this guy you could probably use a little bit of algebra with, whereas you probably can't use any algebra with an 8-year-old. Like, he has some specific skills. If you think like generic 8-year-old plus a few specific things that I have specific reason to think he actually knows how to do, then I think you'll have more success. But you definitely didn't say no assumptions like generically, full stop.
Yeah.
There's a certain type of assumption that's relevant here. Like, are you specifically assuming the things that are in dispute? Because it's part of your point is that the whole system isn't in dispute. When you have large systems that are mutually refuting, it'll be particular parts that are in dispute.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's often possible to find arguments that don't just depend specifically on the stuff in dispute. Which reminds me, so quickly about the overall topic. You can divide it into two cases. A and so like A explains a flaw in B, and B has no rebuttal to that specific thing, including no refutation of one of the premises of that particular argument. Or two, like they could both have arguments where they're challenging each other's premises. Like case two is like you're sort of, you don't know the answer. Neither one has an argument that works from both POVs. Need better arg. But you always have to find what particular things are in dispute, and then how can we step back and what arguments make sense without making assumptions about the specific things in dispute. You have to not beg the question and then find a way to argue your point. That's the main thing you do about these mutual contradicting things, is you find out, like, okay, what's the disagreement about? Then, given that that's unresolved, what arguments could be made that are acceptable to both sides?
Yeah. So I like around this point or a little bit later, like essentially have lost confidence that there's sufficient ground. Like his points about, I mean, he just brings up PNC without actually using the, what is it, principle of non-contradiction or something or other. So he's brought up something about that, and then his only, thing about that was like, I didn't say that PNC was false. And it's just like, there's no point talking about this. So twice in this thing I say, I'm not convinced we're going to get anywhere productive.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty you can do with this kind of thing. Like, you can make a tree, you can figure out what's going on, you can analyze it. So there's plenty for you to learn here. But tag is hard to talk to. So you'll be better off talking with someone who is also trying to learn, and they have a better chance of helping each other.
Yep.
Whereas, yeah,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Tag is not actually trying to learn from you or teach you. Like, he's not really taking seriously, like, let me explain this so the guy actually understands. He's giving very brief explanations that are not adequate. So even if he was totally right and he knew what he was talking about and everything, he still wouldn't be doing a good job. Like, it's like, why would he answer you at all if he's not going to say enough to express his point? Like, he seems
Yeah,
to... I think he's arguing as if he was talking to someone very similar to himself who was only missing like one or two minor things. And then on that assumption, someone could actually concede to what he's saying, I guess. But you're clearly not that person.
No, yeah.
Okay, so what are your plans for next time? Or to work on?
So yeah, there's some personal or, other writing type stuff like the thing I mentioned at the beginning. That's mostly what I was thinking of doing, and then things along that line. So starting to analyze some stuff that I've been meaning to either analyze or to read some stuff that people have written that's more like work related. Um, uh, Before getting into anything like deeper in work stuff myself, like I figured that was a good sort of first thing. Otherwise, I want to do more writing practice in general, and figuring out like reading habits is something that I'm interested in prioritizing for myself, because I don't
Okay.
think I've yeah
Yeah, with this kind of stuff, you should treat it as writing practice. Like, either one,
mm,
don't respond, or two, just try to write something good regardless of whether this guy will appreciate it. Like, if you're gonna
yeah
respond, just try to write the kinds of things you would want to write in general that you would think were valuable.
yeah okay. We might that the comment right at the end. I would like to discuss that a bit next time, because there's some
Okay.
I get pretty blunt, and so I think it's probably worth looking at for other reasons. But yep, okay, cool.
But